Are the people around you getting inspired by how you lead your life? Or are they just dealing with the damage of your drift, daily exhaustion, and overwhelm? Well, think about it. The people who interact with you the most, your family when you walk through that front door, your team in the middle of a high stakes meeting or project, or just the people that you serve every day, you're influencing them. Now, are they being uplifted by that just the overflow of your personal clarity, focus, and growth? Or are they just dealing with the damage from your daily exhaustion, stress, and the reactive drift? See, in this episode, it's all about the influence switch and how you can be intentional with the influence that you have. Are you leading your life? Or are you just accepting it by reacting to all the things that come your way? See, every day, a silent enemy quietly steals away the purpose and the energy from values-driven people. Here, we call it the drift. It leaves you feeling exhausted and unfulfilled. The solution isn't more efficiency or a new time management hack. No, it requires self-leadership. Because the truth is, the hardest person you will have to lead is the one in the mirror. Well, welcome to Lead Your Life. I'm your host, Nick Mazey. Here, we focus on the 1% shifts that you can make to lock in your daily choices into deep alignment with your core values and true purpose. Stop drifting, my friend. Live your values and start leading your life. Let's dive in. What if the most powerful way to help the people around you to thrive and to be their best wasn't about directing them or trying to fix them? But what if it was simply leading your own life so well that your positive influence helped them to win as well? See, sometimes we have this assumption that influence, requires force or coercion or even positional authority. When true influence, is simply that being that positive impact on somebody else. See, there's an expression that says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. That's one thing that John Maxwell says. So here, we're using the word influence, but a lot of this, it's how we're going to lead others by how we lead ourselves. And that is all about the influence switch, and how we can flip this influence switch so that we can actually live out our best lives, by leading our lives well in a way that is a positive influence on others. And we ultimately end up leading them for their own growth because of how we're leading ourselves. In the first few episodes, we started to introduce these switches. We made the change to Lead Your Life, or the title of the podcast. We went through the first three switches, which were episode 96. We went into the clarity switch, how we really can get crystal clear on our values and our vision for our lives. It kind of sets that foundation for where we'll be able to align our daily actions with what's most important. And then episode 97, we went into the focus switch, and that's really prioritizing what matters most to you. It's prioritizing the values and the vision. And once we have those values and the vision, we begin to prioritize them, then we get into the next switch, which is the growth switch. This is where we're really, expanding our capacity, and we're being intentional with our own personal growth. That was episode 98. And now we're into the influence switch. And we're becoming that person of influence, that we're going to influence others well, and we're going to, lead them, but not from a positional authority dictating what they do with force or coercion type of way. But we're going to instead dive into this episode. We're going to get into how when we're leading our own lives well, then we can be that positive influence. Ends up coming across a whole lot better rather than just trying to bark orders around. And I know I'm jumping ahead just a little bit with this, but for crying out loud, if you just try to tell other people to do a bunch of things that you're not doing yourself, then there's going to be that disconnect. That's not being authentic. And if you have the power and the authority to do that, then they're just following you because you might cut off their paycheck or something like that, because you have that power. But it's not that genuine person where they truly want to follow you, and you are being that leader. But if you're authentic with how you're leading by your own behaviors, then people are going to want to follow you. And as I'm saying this, I'm not going to get into the 5 levels of leadership by John Maxwell, but the positional authority, he calls that the lowest level. Like if you're leading based off your title, then that's like the lowest level of leadership. And we don't want to do anything at the lowest level. Not here in this podcast. I don't want that for my life, and I don't want that for you either. So as I mentioned, we're on the 4th switch today, the influence switch. But in the next episode, a little bit of a teaser, we're going to get into that last one, the 5th switch. Now, I'm working through these here on this podcast, and I'll mention it again toward the end. But we do have the Life Leaders community there, with values and growth-minded professionals and people where we want to lead our lives well. It's going to all be based on these switches with the clarity, the focus, the growth, the influence, and then what we're going to talk about in the next episode. There will be a monthly focus on each one of these where we continue to work through them with some action steps, some weekly alignment activities, simple, short activities and lessons where we can do this. Because I know we're all busy. We got a million things. You don't need a 94-hour program you have to get through in order to be able to experience this growth. It's all through the 1% shifts, the small adjustments that you can make and build and compound over time to lead your life well. You can go to nickmazy.com/lifeleaders. That'll take you to the About page, learn some more about the community. Would love to have you in there so we can work together and lead our lives well. All right, on to this influence switch. Well, look, I know when you think about influence, think about leadership, a lot of times we think about growth. But I'm going to go ahead and start at home, because one of the greatest gifts that you can really give your family and people in your home, it isn't about the strict rules or giving them a lecture. It's about, being present and being values aligned. Like when you bring that level, you have your values and you're living out your values truly at home, that's going to be a huge impact, and it's going to be a positive influence on the people at your house and in that family. Think about this. When you lead yourself well, you walk through that front door, and you have that emotional bandwidth, where you're attentive and you're living out your values, you're automatically going to lift that home atmosphere, right? I mean, think about it. If you walk in just exhausted, burned out, frustrated, stressed out, and all those other things, how's that going to impact the atmosphere and the home? Well, that's, how are you leading that house? That's exactly what it is. In managing your own stress, it allows you to actually act as the thermostat instead of just the thermometer. I don't know if you've heard this analogy before, but if you're going to act as that thermostat, see, you're setting the temperature. You're setting the atmosphere and the environment, for your home. Rather than the thermometer, it's just reading and reacting. It's, we don't want to be reactive. We want to be intentional. See, in that last episode when I was talking about the growth switch, I talked a lot about really making sure that you're setting your environment up so that you can succeed, so that you can, live that life, so you can live out your values. You can achieve what you want to achieve. Think about it the same way at home. It might not be, achieving something at home. You might not view it the same way, but if you're acting as that thermostat, then you're actually setting the environment that you want. And a lot of that comes from how you're acting. Who are you bringing home when you walk in that door? Are you bringing the chaos and the stress of the day? Or are you going to be intentional with how you walk through that door to set the thermostat for the environment that you want so that your family can thrive too? When you're living out your purpose with gratitude, in those clear boundaries, that leads the way for your household and your home to also live intentionally and to grow and develop and improve. So your own example that you're showing, that's the inspiration for them to follow. This is something that I have to live out all the time. So I have to intentionally leave, work behind, whether it's the stress, the challenges, the busyness, all that. I have to intentionally leave that behind, or it'll spill into my family. If I'm not, creating that separation, that boundary from what happened at work to who I'm bringing home, then it's going to spill over. And the worst part about it is I'm just going to end up giving my family the leftovers. My family's one of the most important things to me. And if I'm giving them the leftovers and giving my work the best, but they've kind of used me all up, then that's not fair. That's not what I want. That doesn't honor my values. So with this, we have to. I have to do it. So I want to throw it out there for you. Once again, this is something that I do, so it might work for you. Is to intentionally leave the stress and the challenges behind, and then set your intention for how you want to be at home. See, for me, I want to be very intentional. I want to leave the stress and the challenges of work behind so I can be that intentional, attentive dad and husband that I want to be. And now, it might sound impossible, and I'm not saying that I have it perfect by no means, but you can do a simple driveway transition. It's a simple just driveway transition of a few moments. Like say 1 minute. 2 is great, but hey, if you got 1 minute, you got 1 minute. I know sometimes when I pull in the house, the girls are running up to the truck and all that stuff really quick, so I only have a few seconds sometimes. But it's just all about intentionally releasing the stress from the day. Just telling yourself, just release. And then set your intention for who you want to be when you go inside. It doesn't have, you can expand this with more activities and different things you can do. But hey, if you're a busy parent and all the other things going on, sometimes you don't have a ton of time. But if you took 1 minute, 60 seconds, and intentionally told yourself to release the stress of the day, and then set your intention for who you want to be as soon as you go inside, I mean, it does a world of difference. Like I said, you're not going to be perfect. You're not going to be perfect. Don't worry about that. But it sure can help a whole lot. So do that driveway transition, and that way you can have that positive, more of that positive influence when you step inside. And a great way, if you want to continue to bring on that additional positive influence, is just think about something that's positive, that's light, that's genuine, that's helpful, to be able to share with your family. When you intentionally bring some of that positivity and that growth, now you really are setting that example and being that positive influence. So that's all under the kind of the first pillar, the first point in this episode. And that's just really about bringing your best self home. If you want to work on being a positive influence, and flipping this influence switch with intentionality, then start at the house. Because let's face it, when you're at work, there's all these KPIs and direct reports and all these other things where it kind of naturally builds into, this is leadership, this is management, this is the structure, this is how you influence and tell people what to do. And at home, like, it is really a whole lot more about how you're carrying yourself. That's where it's the tougher challenge, but in my opinion, it's even more important than at work. So having that positive influence at home, that's that first point. And the second point for this episode is, making sure that your influence comes from a life lived well. All right, think about this. Your influence is coming from your life, okay? There's an old saying, and I don't know who started it, or otherwise I'd give him credit, but it's leadership is spelled EXAMPLE. And I always go back to this. If you want to lead, if you want to lead others, then you got to be setting that example, which is all about this self-leadership, right? So it's about taking full ownership of your daily choices, to set that positive standard. When you're setting that positive standard by taking ownership of yourself, then you're going to automatically pull people up with you. Because you're not looking down on anybody else. You're not condemning them. Instead, you're looking in the mirror and you're leading that person in the mirror by setting that positive example. Now, have you ever been there where somebody who wasn't doing something well was then criticizing you and trying to direct you to do it? Or have you ever worked for somebody that would boss others around but then not do the same thing that they're calling them to do? People aren't moved or inspired by someone that pushes them or directs them, barks orders at them. They're inspired by watching somebody live out what they're encouraging them to do. It really goes into credibility. When you are living out, when you're setting that example for what you want others to do, Well, then they buy into it. Then you have that credibility, you have that authenticity. Then people want to follow you because you're setting the example. You're not just telling them what they should do, you're actually doing it yourself. See, and this is huge. It elevates the culture at work, it elevates the culture at home, and everywhere in between. Not to jump back and forth between home and work, but this is something that goes on at my household. I tell my girls to pick up their laundry in their bathroom. Well, I better go look at mine and make sure I didn't leave some clothes on the floor, right? I mean, imagine that. Telling them to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. Well, I'm setting that example. Or here's the kicker: when they're upset, and I'm gonna pull back the curtain a little bit. Might make myself sound terrible, but it's okay. When they're arguing, am I going to raise my voice to tell them to calm down and be quiet? That's a tough one. And it's a tough one. But at the same time, it's the example that I'm setting. So think about this for you. If you want to lead others, if you want to have that positive influence, that's what leadership is. It's having that influence. Are you setting the example with your own behaviors? So this is the tough one. And with here, a little takeaway, a little action step for you for this week is really just to focus on one of your core values. Don't try to do everything, but focus on one of your core values, okay, that you want to intentionally model during the next demanding meeting, a high-stakes interaction. Or you can apply this at the house too, maybe at home. What's one model or one value that you really need to model, that you want to have that positive influence, as you want other people to follow your example? So you're going to really model this one value. Get crystal clear on that. Write it down. This is all about setting your intention. Like I said, in the the life leaders community, I like to do these weekly alignments. Where we kind of review and then set the intention. We get really specific on this. Write it down, and set that intention for how you're going to model that core value. Because then when you get specific and you're not trying to do 34 different things all at once, and you're going to do this one, it's going to allow you to follow through on that and to have that impact, to have that influence. And by modeling it well, people are going to notice because you're going to be intentional about that thing. Okay. Well, what is it? What is that one value, and how are you going to model it out? And with this, see what you're doing here when setting this example. See, you're taking ownership. You're taking ownership of how you're executing, and you're automatically going to place more focus on that than pointing out where other people fall short. And this is real leadership right here. Okay? Because when you focus on how you're going to execute on your specific priorities, when your values to the highest degree possible, you're going to set that example. Then if you ever did have to say something to somebody else, they're going to listen to you 1,000 times more because they've seen the example that you set. Them listening, and they're listening and giving your credence and credibility to the words that are coming out of your mouth because the example that you're setting. Oh man, now that's being a positive influence. You got this. You can be this influence. So that's the second point. It's all about the influence coming from the life you're living, from the example that you're setting. Now here's this last major point for this episode, all about this influence switch, is the influence from your growth. See, when personal growth improves your life, you don't hoard those insights. You share them. You generously share what you've learned to elevate others and help others win. Again, this is a massive benefit to positive growth, and it's having a huge impact and influence on others. See, when you flip those first three switches, the clarity, your focus, and your growth, it is setting yourself up to be this influence for others. And it's so rewarding. It's so rewarding, and then that kind of helps encourage you because you see how other people are growing and improving by your influence on them, and it becomes this positive feedback loop that is just truly amazing. Now, of course, it takes work, but hey, everything worthwhile is uphill all the way, right? Just another John Maxwell quote for you. But this growth that you're going through, by doing these things, it's not a trophy to be displayed. It's not a badge to wear, or a medal to go around your neck. It's something to be shared for the benefit of others. And for family, for friends, for colleagues, people in your community, whoever and wherever. Share your growth with them, not as a look what I've done, but as that example that you're setting so that you can be that positive influence and so that you can extend it past yourself. Offer that helpful framework. Once again, by the example that you're setting, not something that's disingenuous that you're not doing yourself, but offer some encouragement, maybe something that you've learned. Maybe reflect on your own experience. That's a great way is share with somebody some of your experience. Or maybe where you really want to get somebody to listen, share about where you've messed up a little bit and what you had to do to correct it. So they know you're not perfect. That's a huge one. But you can empower others by sharing your own growth and by sharing what you're doing. And when things go well, to share the credit. When things go well, to share the credit, to celebrate the progress of others. Everybody needs some encouragement. Everyone is fighting a battle in their lives, and to have this positive influence, from your own growth, is making sure that you're encouraging and celebrating others, helping them along the way. This is what's really going to help them to continue to grow and for you to have that impact and to have that influence. All right. This is something that I've learned a while back, and I strive to do it. I really do. Sometimes I do it better than others, but as really celebrating others. And when something goes well, when I'm a part of a team, and even if I'm quote unquote leading the team, when something goes well and there's a success, always try to point that to other people. Because that encourages, maybe somebody needs that a lot more than you, or they're having a rough time. You have such a huge influence on them by sharing that success and pointing that success toward the other people. Now, make sure, it's, just giving it where someone didn't do anything, because that won't be received well by others either. But making sure that you're pointing the success to them, as well as, this happens. It's happened at my work, and it's one of those things that we have this one person, farther up the chain, that, he likes to say, congratulations, or you did a good job on certain things. And I definitely appreciate that, because I'm involved in multiple projects and teams. But I always try to point that the accolades to somebody that did the work. I may have contributed, great, but I'm good with it. And so I'm going to try to point those accolades to where I can. First of all, even if that person's not standing there, because that way the higher ups and the VPs and all that stuff, they know that this person's doing a great job, and I'm going to make sure that credit goes to that person. But there's something that happens sometimes, and it's in some of our meetings, and I'm thinking about this one time, and the person, things didn't go according to plan, and the things didn't happen that should have happened. I'm not going to give too many details, but it just didn't. And the way that this person deflected responsibility, didn't take ownership of anything, it was painful for me. It was painful for me, and that was the opposite of leadership. That was opposite of being a positive influence. See, a positive influence, they're going to point the credit to other people. And when things don't go right, they're going to take the blame. They're going to take ownership. You point the credit and the accolades to the team, to whoever did the work, or whoever contributed anywhere. And then when it doesn't go right, you take ownership. You take the blame. It's hard to do that. I'm definitely not telling you I do it perfect, by no means. But when you do that you become that positive influence 100%, because people appreciate that and they respect that. So here's the action step for this point, this pillar for this episode, is how can you execute a growth transfer? How can you share a helpful insight or something that you're doing or some benefit that you've received with somebody else. Just one. Just, give somebody a little bit of a benefit from the growth that you experience or some improvement that you've made. Share it with somebody. That is a huge way to be a positive influence, is to share some insight, some growth with somebody. It could be, at home, at work, a peer, a colleague, a friend, a neighbor, somebody in the community. Somebody. Pass on some of that growth and that knowledge, that experience, that insight that you've got. And you know what you can do too? Is give one specific encouragement to somebody in your sphere. That goes a long. That is some great positive influence right there. Okay, all right. Well, those are the 3 main points, for this episode. Not quite done yet. These are the 3 main points. Is look at that influence, and bringing your best self to your home. Look at that influence there, and to lead your home well. To have the influence of leading your life well. To have the influence of your own growth, and what that looks like. Now we're gonna go back to just one point. A little bit of a guardrail is that having that self leadership first. See, having this self leadership first is so important. You've heard the saying, "You can't pour from an empty cup." But to remain consistent, to remain intentional, you've got to protect that baseline alignment, that energy. So, if you're sacrificing your peace and your health to support others, it's going to lead to the burnout. It's going to lead to the overwhelm, the reactive behaviors, the drift, 100%. So that's where you have to set up some of those boundaries. Making sure that you are protecting your health, your well-being. That goes back to the first 2 switches with clarity and with focus. See, when your personal self-care and all that, when it drops off, you're not going to have the mental bandwidth, the capacity, to be able to handle the stress, the emotions, the challenges, the overwhelm, all the chaos. Make sure you're leading yourself well by staying aligned with what's most important to you. This goes back into, setting those boundaries, being able to say no. Every yes is also a no. So if you're saying yes to a whole lot of things, then what are you saying no to? I won't go down a tangent of this too much, but I want you to check in with yourself real quick, just for a few minutes. And are you taking care of yourself, and so that you can lead yourself well, so that you can do all these other things? But go back to your clarifying your values and your vision, making sure you're making them a priority. Sound good, my friend? Do that check in with yourself, especially now with this switch. We're looking at influencing others. Yeah, take care of yourself in order to influence them well too. All right, man. So thank you for listening. That's some of the main points for this one. I want you to focus on leading your life well. Lead your life. See, when your growth and your habits and your values, when they're aligned, your positive impact for those around you, it's inevitable. It's inevitable. You're going to have this positive influence because you know what's the most important to you and the purpose of your life, because you've prioritized that. You're growing and improving, expanding your capacity, and being intentional with how you're living your life. That's going to lead 100% to the positive influence on others. And then in the next episode, we're going to get into the last switch. It's really taking a further leap forward. Yes, it's about leading your life. But as you've noticed with this episode, we're stepping into being an influence on others. And then the next one, we're going to take it one step further, really to live that life of significance. Okay, my friend? And look, if it sounds like a lot to go on, a lot to do. 100%, it is. It's a way of living life to its fullest with intentionality, purpose, and significance, with clarity according to your values. So that sounds like a big lift. Well, it is. But as John Maxwell says, everything worthwhile is uphill all the way. So that's why I want to encourage you to not do it alone. And if you want to surround yourself with values and growth-minded professionals and intentional people who want to raise the standard, for their lives, as well as to encourage each other. And we're going to have, then I'll encourage you to join the community, the Life Leaders community. It's on the school platform. You can go to nickmazy.com/lifeleaders, and it'll direct you to the About page. There's a video, some information. Come check it out. Right now I'm still looking for, a few founding members to join in. There's some benefits that come along with being a founding member, but one of them is that there's going to be more opportunity for your input, for your suggestions, for learning what works well for you, so we can help guide the whole community together and making sure it's a solid foundation for the life leaders out there to lead their lives. I want you to be a part of it. So once again, go to nickmazy.com/lifeleaders. I'll make sure I have the link in the show notes for this. And I'd love to see you in there. All right, my friend, here's to you. Stop drifting. Live your values and lead your life well. I'll see you in the next episode.